In the middle of a freezing 15-degree winter night, the man I once called husband looked straight into my eyes and coldly uttered, "Leave everything behind and get out of here immediately." I didn't cry, nor did I beg. Silently, I donned my late father's worn-out coat, clutched the 7-month-old fetus in my womb, and walked straight out into the swirling snowstorm. They thought they had taken everything and driven my child and me to the brink of ruin. But they didn't know that this old coat held a terrifying secret capable of overthrowing an entire family empire. The moment I returned. "I'm so grateful you chose to spend your time here. Now tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, your city, your country? Let's see how far this reaches." Also, please note this story includes fictional elements added for entertainment and thoughtful purposes. Any resemblance to actual names or locations is purely coincidental, but the truth inside it is worth your attention. The files were in a folder labeled Q4 Reconciliation, which was the kind of name designed to be ignored. I found them on a Tuesday evening in February, 3 days before Valentine's Day, while Julian was at what he called a dinner meeting. I was not looking for anything. I had forgotten the Wi-Fi password and needed his laptop. What I found instead was a folder inside a folder inside a folder, the kind of nested structure that is either very organized or very hidden. When you are a trained accountant who spent 6 years auditing mid-sized corporations, you know immediately which one it is. I opened the first file, then the second, then I stopped and sat very still for a long time. $31 million, 6 years. 4 shell companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands, timed to coincide with quarterly filings in a pattern invisible to anyone not looking and immediately obvious to anyone who was. I did not finish counting. I closed the laptop, put it back exactly where I found it, went to the kitchen and filled a glass of water, and stood at the sink looking out at the snow that had been falling since noon. I was still standing there when Julian's key turned in the lock. He came in unwinding his scarf, already talking about the roads, about something his father had said, and then he stopped. Because I was in the kitchen doorway with the glass of water in my hand, and something in the way I was standing told him the evening had changed. "Everything okay?" he asked. The way you ask when you already know the answer is no. I told him I had used his laptop to find the Wi-Fi password. The change in his face was very small, a tightening around the eyes. Something more calculated than guilt. He said he needed to make a call, walked into the study, and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen listening to the low murmur of his voice through the wall, not frightened, making arrangements. Charles and Victoria Sterling arrived 23 minutes later. Victoria walked in and looked at me the way a person looks at a problem they are about to solve. Charles nodded at Julian. Not words, just acknowledgement between men who have already spoken and know what comes next. Victoria told me what I had found was none of my concern, that the wisest thing I could do was hand over the passwords and conduct myself as though the evening had not happened. I told her I had only looked. I had not copied anything. 4 minutes later, they had taken everything. My phone, my wallet, my keys, my jewelry, every object in that house that I had believed was mine. When they opened the front door, the cold came in immediately. 15 degrees. Victoria looked at the old coat I was wearing. My father's coat, navy blue, a small silver star on the collar, with the eyes of someone looking at something that does not matter. "That old thing," she said. "Keep it." The door closed behind me. I put one hand on my stomach, 7 months along, and I began to walk. The cold hit my lungs like broken glass. 3 steps from the front door and my body was already screaming, fingers curling into fists inside the thin wool pockets, ears burning, throat raw with every breath. The coat was 30 years old and it was losing the fight against 15 degrees and a February wind off Lake Michigan that came at you like it had decided you personally. But my father had given it to me before he died. So I walked. My mind drifted back to 20 years ago, 3 months before my wedding. He had called me into the kitchen of the small house on Cranfield Avenue where I grew up, the house with the crooked back step and the radiator that clanked every night at 2 in the morning like it was trying to tell you something. He was standing at the counter with the coat folded over his arm, smiling the way he smiled when he was proud of something but did not want to make a production of it. "Dad," I said, laughing, "that thing is ancient." 30 years old, he said, completely unbothered. "Good wool doesn't age, it just gets honest." He held it out. "I took it because you did not refuse things Arthur Vance offered you with that particular look on his face. The look that meant this mattered even if he wasn't going to explain why." I turned the coat over and noticed the star on the collar. 5-point silver thread so small you would miss it if you weren't looking. "What's this?" I asked. He touched it gently with one finger. "So the right people will know," he said. "Know what?" He held the coat open for me to slip my arms in, and when I turned around, he put both hands on my shoulders and squeezed once firm, certain. "It will be necessary," he said. "Just that." I laughed out loud. "Daddy, you're being dramatic." He grinned wide and warm, the grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Maybe," he said. "Wear it anyway." 8 months later, he was gone, killed in the line of duty. A report that explained very little, a funeral that answered nothing, and 20 years of questions that nobody in any official capacity ever saw fit to address. Now walking through February snow with the wind finding every gap in 30-year-old wool, my chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. I pressed my hand harder against my stomach. The baby pushed back alive, warm, furious in her small way at being moved through a storm at this hour. Hot tears burned down my cheeks and froze before they reached my jaw. I was crying so hard my ribs hurt, grief and rage and exhaustion, arriving all at once, with nowhere left to go. "I'm sorry, baby," I said out loud. "I'm going to fix this. I promise." She kicked, hard, twice. Through the snow ahead, a yellow light appeared. The bus stops at 55th and Halsted. I started to run. The bus stop had a pole and a sign. No shelter, no bench, no glass panel to break the wind, just metal planted in cracked concrete, and a schedule that bore only a passing relationship to when the buses actually arrived. I had 87 cents in my coat pocket, 3/4 a dime, 2 pennies counted twice, as if counting again might change the result. The fare was $2. I stood there and did the math, and then I stood there some more. The baby pressed against my ribs from the inside, slow and insistent. I pressed back with 2 fingers. "I know," I whispered. "We're going to be okay." I did not know if that was true, but I said it because she needed to hear it, and because I needed to hear myself say it, and because sometimes the only thing between you and complete collapse is the sound of your own voice making a promise you are not sure you can keep. The first bus arrived at 4:47. I stepped to the curb with one hand raised, the other flat against my stomach. The doors opened and warm air rolled out like a small miracle. I stepped up, touched my card to the reader, and heard the sound I had been dreading, a flat, indifferent beep. Insufficient fare. The driver, a heavy-set man in his mid-40s name tag, reading Gerald, looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen, with the efficiency of a man who had made this calculation many times and stopped finding it uncomfortable. "Fare's $2, ma'am. You're short." I looked past him at the bus. 22 people. A woman with her eyes on her phone. A man watching the snow like it was the most interesting thing he had ever seen. A young mother whose eyes met mine for one brief second before sliding away. Not one of them moved. I said, "Please." The word cost me something. Gerald looked at his clock, his fare box, everything except my face. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. I walked back to the pole and put my shoulders against it because my legs were shaking. 20 minutes passed, maybe more. Time does strange things when you are cold enough. I could feel my body making the decisions bodies make when something matters more than comfort. My knees buckled once. I caught the pole with both hands and hung there, head down, breath coming in short white clouds. Then at the far end of the block, headlights appeared through the snow. I let go of the pole. I straightened up with everything I had left. I raised one hand. I was still standing. Marcus Bear Higgins told me later that he almost missed the stop entirely. The snow had been coming down since 4 in the afternoon, not the soft decorative kind that makes Chicago look like a postcard, but the mean horizontal kind that comes off Lake Michigan with a personal grievance and reduces visibility to whatever is directly in front of your headlights. He was running 11 minutes behind, nursing the bus through intersections that had gone glassy with ice, watching the road, the way a man watches something he does not entirely trust. Then his headlights swept the corner of 55th and Halsted. He told me it was not me he noticed first. It was the light. A cold silver flash from my collar, five-pointed, barely the size of a thumbnail there, and gone in under a second as the beam moved past. His hands tightened on the wheel before his mind had finished forming the thought. He knew that star. Not because he had seen it recently, because it had been living in him for 21 years in the particular place where the things that change your life are stored permanently and without your permission, below thought, below language, in the body itself. In the spring of 2001, Marcus had been pinned down in a bad situation on the west side, the kind that happens when your intelligence is wrong and your position is already compromised. He had been closest to the door. He had been the one in the open. My father, Arthur Vance, had stepped in front of what was coming toward him, not heroically, not with a speech, simply with the quiet decisiveness of a man whose body had already made the decision before his mind caught up. The shot caught Arthur in the shoulder. He went down hard, cursing with considerable creativity, and Marcus caught him, and they spent the next several minutes on the floor of that building, with Arthur bleeding and furious, and Marcus unable to speak. Later at the hospital, Marcus had pressed a small spool of silver tactical thread into my father's hand, the kind the unit used for marking gear in low visibility. "Sew it somewhere you'll always have it," he had said, "so I can find you in the dark." My father laughed, that full room-filling laugh. "Bear," he had said, "you are the most sentimental man alive who would absolutely deny being sentimental." Marcus had denied it. He had meant every word. 3 years later, my father was dead, and Marcus had carried the weight of that silver thread for 2 decades, a small, bright point of grief that never went fully dark. Now he was staring at